It's a really good question that gets asked a lot. How do you beat these Georgia Bulldogs, and why is it so difficult doing it? The answer is pretty simple. It's hard to deal with all that Georgia's got, and it's not just any one player. And this is something we're going to talk about today because a lot of the focus that I'll have over the next few months, that people will have over the next week, and the focus coming out of G Day will be the quarterbacks. Who has the best day, who looks the best, etc. Carson Beck coming into the G Day as he had a lead, you presume. I mean, he's the only real quarterback that played a season ago. And how does he look? How is Brock Vandagriff? Does he look better now that they're both really getting a shot going with the number one units? But the problem is, for anyone who's playing Georgia, that you're going to have to beat the entire team. That's the problem. And that's something I talk about. I'm linking it down below. Also, down there, there's a couple of links. One, well, there's Keely Ringo book is in stock with his signature. I do not have a ton of these. Make sure you're getting that now while you can. But the article is just below the link to the Keely book that's signed by Keely, and it talks about uh, there's a lot going on in this league right now. First of all, you've got three SEC quarterbacks that are probably going to go in the first round, maybe in the top 15 picks. You've got Stetson Bennett, he's gone. So that's four very noticeable quarterbacks that are gone from the league. The two, top returning quarterbacks, I might be forgetting somebody that is not out of the realm of possibility at all. But the top two returning quarterbacks, perhaps the top three, are Spencer Rattler at South Carolina, Mississippi State's quarterback, and then Jalen Daniels at LSU. So there's been a lot of turnover at the top of the league in terms of quarterbacks. We've seen this over time. But what I would say about that is, as much as is made about quarterbacks. The problem, again, dealing with playing Georgia is they're so good everywhere else, generally speaking. I mean, they really excel. The one spot that they really are so good at, and you can tell if there's a problem when Georgia's struggling with this, but Georgia's been the number one rushing defense for three of the last 4 years. They were number two the year they were not number one. Now let me say that one more time. They have been the number one rushing defense in three of the last 4 years. And the year they were not number one, they were number two. So, well, okay, people can't run. Why does that matter? If you can't run, you can't function. Okay. You're not just going to throw the ball everywhere. Think about the games that Georgia played and the other team thought they could throw it everywhere. Mississippi State is spot number one. They didn't score 20 points. They did not score 20 points. In fact, I don't think they scored over 14 offensive points. That's not good. Okay. I mean, Oregon, I don't think is a great example, but Oregon, with what they would try to do with Bo Nix, Spencer Rattler at South Carolina, the one team that had success throwing it against Georgia was Ohio State. Well, guess what they did? They ran it a little bit. They ran it enough. Just like Florida in 2020, they ran it enough. If you don't run, you're not going to be successful against this team, against this program. And so by not permitting 2nd and 6, by not permitting 2nd and 3, you take away a lot of the opportunity for the other team to score, okay, or just to possess the ball. You can't score without possessing the ball. You have to possess the ball. If you the only form of scoring without possessing the ball is a safety. That's it. That's when you do not possess the ball. But if you're scoring a defensive touchdown, if you're kicking a field goal, if you're scoring a touchdown, which is probably 87% of scoring in college football, maybe higher. Um, you literally hold the ball as you go into the end zone, or you possess it in that area. If you don't have the ball, you can't score. And so what happens is teams that cannot teams that cannot possess the ball are unlikely to score against Georgia, which leads to even more problems because that means you're punting and you're giving the ball back to Georgia, which has failed to score at least 30 points 5 times in the last 30 games. So if you're one of the teams that can hold Georgia, if you're one of the 16% of teams that can hold Georgia to fewer than 30 points, you got a chance to win. The problem is, just going off the top of my head, that those 5 teams, only one of them did that. So Clemson couldn't do it because Clemson couldn't score. Missouri couldn't do it because they couldn't score. Not in a way, I mean, it was not as bad as Clemson, but it was bad. Kentucky, they could not score. And then the final one was, oh man, I can't remember who the final one was, but they had an issue scoring as well. Well, anyway, it was 5 teams, and Alabama was the one that actually won. But Alabama in that SEC championship game, they ran it up. So I'm talking about what people are not talking about. We will come out of Saturday. I'm extremely excited for Saturday. Saturday's going to be fun. As blistery as it still is, it's in the 50s right now in Athens. Um, as blistery as it has been, it will warm up for G Day, and we won't see what we saw at the Masters over the weekend, which was just sort of difficult weather. You'll see really good weather, but what folks will talk about is, oh, I like that Brock Vandagriff can run around. Oh, I like Carson Beck's pocket presence. That is one player, an important or the most important player on the team, but it is one of 22. We are well past the time at Georgia where one person dictates what's going to happen in the game. As important as Stetson Bennett has been, and as important, and the guy should be in the College Football Hall of Fame, okay? But you don't get 2 national championships without the other 21 guys on the team. And it's everybody together. And you know the challenge really in dealing with Georgia is all of it. It's all of it. They'll make you pay everywhere you turn. They'll make you pay these guys. They're difficult to deal with, and that's why it's so hard beating them. The challenge is not just how are we going to stop Brock Vandagriff from getting around the corner on us, or how are we going to deal with Carson Beck, just lacing balls in there like it's no big deal. A more fleet-footed Mac Jones. How are we going to deal with all those things? No, I mean, yeah, that's a problem, but they are they are an all-court tennis player. They are, for lack of a better term, they are Kobe Bryant. They can do anything. They can post you up. They can bring the ball up the court. They can come off screens. They can create their own shot with off the dribble. There's a lot of stuff that they can do that, that's hard to defend. And when they're defending, much like Kobe really when he really wanted to, they can get in your ass, man. They can really be a problem defensively. So I think, to me, when you look at Georgia's situation, and again, I would point you down. Read this article down below. It's saying it in a way that's a little bit more coherent, perhaps. But the problem with beating Georgia, why is it so difficult to beat the Dogs? It's everything. It's all of it combined, man. I mean, it's really troubling to go into these games and expect to beat them when you don't have when you can't match them, for lack of a better term, uh when you can't depend on, easy points the way that they do. And they're just sometimes Georgia's just stealing points because think back to the Carolina game, and this was in 2021. Think back to that game, and South Carolina really played pretty well. I would argue they played pretty well in the first half. They scored points, which was very strange. Clemson didn't do that. They scored a touchdown in the first whatever it was. I think they scored, but whatever it was, Carolina was actually moving the ball, and then the Georgia defense exploded on them. And Georgia made them pay right after that. They made them pay. Think about the 21 Florida game where the game was competitive. The Gators were kind of hanging in there, and then the Georgia defense smothered them, and it was over in a matter of no time at all. Uh, in 22, Georgia's defense really just stopped Ohio State. I mean, they just didn't do anything in the second half, hardly. And then an 18-point comeback by the offense. And it's like, well, the 18-point comeback doesn't happen without everybody playing well. Jack Panesley kicking a field goal that, when Georgia really needed a touchdown, he still didn't miss. Okay. And then when you have, Arian Smith wide open on a really long pass play, all of these things happen together. They all coincide. It just, you get rolled up on. That's the real problem, is it's all too much. It's all hard to deal with. Well, it just is too much to deal with. There's too many moving parts to handle. And folks have not recruited the way Georgia has. Obviously, they've not developed the way that Georgia has. It's just too much. That's why it's so difficult beating Kirby Smart's Georgia teams.